The Arizona sun hung low over the Organ Pipe Desert, painting the rocks in shades of rust and shadow. Commander Reese Blackwood had seen 37 combat deployments in his 22 years as a Navy SEAL. He knew the difference between a mission that would end quietly and one that would haunt him for decades. This one felt like the latter. His team had been moving through the valley for 4 hours, 6 operators pushing through terrain that wanted them dead. Their objective was deceptively simple on paper. Recover classified technology from a downed surveillance drone and locate the missing pilot before hostile forces could reach either first. The drone had crashed 12 hours ago. Lieutenant Sloan Mercer, 29 years old. 2 combat tours had gone dark immediately after the crash. No beacon, no radio contact, no body recovered by the quick reaction force that had swept the primary crash site. Command had listed her as MIA, not KIA, which meant somewhere in this godforsaken desert she might still be alive. What Blackwood knew, and his team didn't yet, was that intelligence suggested the crash wasn't an accident. Someone had fed information to hostile forces. Someone had told them when and where that drone would be flying. Someone had given them the weapons to bring it down. The drone itself carried an experimental EMP prototype technology that could disable every electronic system within 50 kilometers. In the wrong hands, it could cripple military installations, darken entire cities, turn the balance of power in this region on its head. Chief got smoke ahead, 2 clicks north. The voice belonged to Lieutenant Holden Grant, their sniper and field medic. At 36, Holden was the rare operator who could thread a needle at 1,000 meters or through a collapsed trachea. He moved through the rocks with his Barrett M82A1 slung across his back, 30 pounds of precision steel that he carried like a second spine. Blackwood raised his fist. The team froze 6 shadows melting into stone. Through his scope, Blackwood studied what Holden had spotted. A small village, maybe 20 structures, clustered between 2 ridges. White smoke rose from the center, thick and recent. Not cooking fires, not vehicle exhaust. Something else. Crash site, Petty Officer Dane Kowalski asked. At 35, Kowalski was their breacher, built like a concrete wall and twice as stubborn. He'd been with Blackwood for 6 years, long enough to read the commander's silences. Wrong trajectory. Drone should have come down east of here. Blackwood lowered his scope. This is off course. Behind them, Specialist Marcus Foster checked his communications equipment. At 31, Foster was their newest addition, transferred from SEAL Team 5 3 months ago. Quiet, competent, always first to volunteer for extra duty. His personnel file showed stellar performance reviews and a work ethic that put veterans to shame. Chief, should I report the position deviation to command? Foster asked. Hold that thought. Let's see what we're dealing with first. Beside Foster, Specialist Wyatt Fisher adjusted his portable surveillance drone, a small quadcopter that gave them eyes beyond their immediate position. At 32, Fisher was their communications and tech specialist, the man who kept them connected to the world beyond the desert. Specialist Crew Donovan, their demolitions expert, at 30, shifted the weight of his explosive kit. And bringing up their 6 moving with the silent grace of a big cat was Specialist Marcus Webb, their heavy weapons specialist and designated machine gunner. 6 men, 60 pounds of gear each, moving through hostile territory toward an objective they didn't fully understand. The team moved in standard patrol formation toward the village. They reached the perimeter as the sun touched the western ridge, painting everything in amber light that would be gone in 30 minutes. Holden's voice crackled through the comm. Chief, I've got visual on smoke source. Central building partial collapse. 1 heat signature inside. Faint. Could be human. Anyone else? Negative, place is empty. They moved house to house, clearing rooms with practiced efficiency. The village showed signs of recent habitation. Cooking pots still held food. Blankets lay folded on sleeping mats. Personal belongings sat untouched. But no people. The smoke came from the largest building, the 2-story structure with mud brick walls in a collapsed northern corner. Blackwood approached with Kowalski on his 6 weapons, ready for anything. The door hung open, swinging slightly in the desert wind. Inside, they found her. A woman lay in the far corner beneath a fallen beam, her left leg pinned at an unnatural angle. Small frame, maybe 5'4", slender build, blonde hair matted with dust and blood. She wore civilian clothes, cargo pants, and a work shirt, both torn and dirty. Her face was pale with shock and blood loss, but her eyes were sharp, tracking their movements with unusual precision. American, she said, not a question. A statement of fact delivered with unsettling calm for someone trapped under 200 pounds of wood and stone. Ma'am, we're U.S. military. What's your name? Tessa Marlowe. I work with Border Hope Initiative, medical aid for migrants. She tried to shift, Gast fell back. The others evacuated when the shooting started yesterday. Kowalski examined the beam. Chief, this thing weighs 200 pounds easy. We'll need leverage. Holden was already kneeling beside her, pulling out his medical kit. His hands moved with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd treated dozens of combat wounds. As he reached for her leg, she spoke quietly. Tourniquet first, 2 inches above the break. The femoral artery is compromised. Holden's hand stopped mid-motion. He looked at her, then at the injury, then back at her face. How do you know that? I can feel it, internal bleeding. Class 4 hemorrhagic shock. You have approximately 15 minutes before I lose consciousness. The medical terminology hung in the air like cordite. Holden didn't waste time arguing. He applied the tourniquet exactly where she'd indicated, his movements careful and precise. As he worked, his fingers brushed against her hands. He felt calluses there, not the soft wear of office work. These were hard ridges along the heel of her palm and the inside of her trigger finger. The kind of calluses that came from gripping something with weight and recoil. Repeatedly. What NGO did you say you're with? Blackwood asked. Border Hope Initiative. We provide medical aid and water stations. And where's the rest of your team? Gone. Cartel forces came through yesterday looking for something. Said everyone had to leave or they'd burn the village. Everyone left. She closed her eyes briefly, breathing through the pain. Except me. I was checking on an old man who couldn't travel. When the explosion happened, and I was trapped. What explosion? Her eyes opened. In the failing light, they were an unusual shade of blue-green, sharp and focused, despite her obvious pain. North of here, something big. The ground shook hard enough to bring down part of this building. North, where the drone crashed. Blackwood exchanged glances with Kowalski. Foster's voice came through the radio. Chief, I'm picking up radio chatter. Spanish and Russian. Multiple vehicles approaching from the east. Estimate 15 minutes out. 15 minutes, the same timeline Tessa had given for her survival. Blackwood made his decision. We take her. Kowalski, crew, get that beam off. Holden, prep her for transport. Fisher, I want eyes on those approaching vehicles. Foster, establish comms with command. Let them know we've got a civilian casualty. Copy that, Chief, Foster replied, his fingers already moving across his equipment. As Kowalski and crew positioned themselves to lift the beam, Holden prepared Tessa for the pain that was coming. This is going to hurt. A lot. She nodded, took the piece of cloth he offered, bit down on it. They lifted the beam. She made barely a sound, just controlled breathing and whitening knuckles as her fingers gripped the stone floor. Holden had treated hundreds of injuries in the field. Broken bones made people scream, made hardened soldiers weep. But this woman, this supposed NGO worker, endured the pain with the kind of discipline he'd only seen in operators with advanced combat training. As Holden shifted her to apply the field splint, her shirt moved slightly. Beneath it, he glimpsed something that made his breath catch. Body armor. Not civilian protection. Military-grade ballistic plating worn close to the skin. He looked up at Blackwood and gave a subtle headshake. Something's wrong here. Foster's voice came through again. Chief Command confirms receipt. They're asking about her identification and organizational affiliation. They want full details. Tell them we're working on it. Right now we need to move. They prepared Tessa for transport. Crew would carry her in a modified fireman's hold, her weight distributed across his shoulders. As they lifted her into position, she pressed her face against Crew's back and breathed through the jolting pain. Left here, she said quietly as they reached a fork in the path between buildings. Blackwood stopped. What? Left, through the courtyard. There's a path down the hillside that can't be seen from the eastern approach. How do you know that? She lifted her head slightly. I've been living here for 8 months. I know every path in this valley. The team exchanged looks. Blackwood nodded. They took the left path. It led exactly where she'd said. A narrow trail winding down through rocks completely concealed from the village entrance. Above them, they could hear vehicles arriving, hear shouted commands in Spanish and Russian. But they were already gone, shadows moving through the desert. As they descended, Holden stayed close to monitor Tessa's condition. Her breathing was controlled despite obvious pain. Too controlled. And her eyes, when they were open, scanned their surroundings with systematic thoroughness. She wasn't just looking, she was assessing, cataloging, the way a tactical operator would. After 20 minutes of movement, she spoke again. Stop. Crew halted immediately. Blackwood raised his fist. The team froze. What is it? The commander asked. Tessa's eyes were fixed on a cluster of rocks about 300 meters ahead. There, in the rocks, 2 men, waiting. Blackwood raised his scope. At first he saw nothing. The rocks, the shadows, the heat shimmer of desert evening. Then a glint of metal. the edge of a rifle barrel catching the last rays of sunlight, and beside it, barely visible against stone, the outline of a man's shoulder. How the hell had she spotted that from 300 meters with a broken leg and blood loss? How did you see that? Kowalski demanded, genuine confusion in his voice. You learned to spot danger quickly out here. But there was hesitation in her response, as if she'd almost said something else. The team adjusted their route, taking a more difficult path that avoided the ambush position. Tessa's directions continued to be invaluable. Every ravine, every vantage point, every piece of dead ground that would hide their movement. She knew them all with the precision of someone who'd studied this terrain for purposes beyond humanitarian work. By late afternoon, exhaustion was setting in. They'd been moving for hours, carrying an injured person through brutal terrain in 100-degree heat. Blackwood called a halt in a shallow cave system that offered concealment and defensive positions. Foster immediately set up his communications equipment, establishing a satellite link with command. Chief, I'm sending position update and sitrep now. Command is asking about extraction timeline. Tell them we need to locate the primary objective first and get me everything they have on Border Hope Initiative. I want to verify her story. While Foster worked his equipment, Holden laid out his medical supplies in better light. I need to examine your injuries more thoroughly, he told Tessa. There might be internal damage I missed in the field. Go ahead. As Holden's hands moved across her torso, checking for broken ribs and internal bleeding, they found what he'd glimpsed earlier. Hidden beneath her torn shirt, pressed flat against her ribs, was a sophisticated communication device. Not civilian equipment. Military-grade encrypted hardware. His fingers traced the outline of ballistic plating underneath her clothing. Body armor designed to stop rifle rounds. These weren't things an NGO worker would have. He looked up at Tessa. She was watching him carefully. When their eyes met, he saw resignation there. She knew he'd found something. She knew the fiction was over. Holden glanced at Blackwood and then gave a subtle nod. The commander approached, his expression hardening. His hand moved to his sidearm, but didn't draw it. Not yet. Ma'am, I think we need to have a different conversation. Tessa closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them, something had changed. The helpless civilian was gone. In her place sat someone with the steady, professional gaze of an operator. My name is Tessa Marlowe, she said quietly, but everything else I told you was a lie. Every weapon in the cave shifted to ready positions. Kowalski's hand went to his rifle. Webb moved to block the cave entrance. Fisher's fingers hovered over his radio, ready to call this in. Even Foster stopped his equipment work, his attention suddenly fixed on the woman they'd just risked their lives to rescue. Who are you? Blackwood demanded. CIA Special Activities Division. Moving slowly and deliberately to show she wasn't going for a weapon, she reached for a hidden pocket in her torn pants. She pulled out a small waterproof pouch and handed it to Blackwood. Inside was CIA identification. The photo matched her face. Beneath it were encrypted communication protocols printed on laminated cards. And at the bottom, a letter on official C, a letterhead signed by someone whose name was redacted, but whose position was clear: Deputy Director of Operations. The letter was brief. It identified Tessa Marlowe as a joint asset authorized to operate in hostile territory under deep cover. It listed an authentication code, Blackbird, and an operation named Desert Phantom. This could be fake, Kowalski said, reading over Blackwood's shoulder. It could be, Tessa agreed calmly. Check the authentication codes with your command. My handler's call sign is Blackbird. The operation is Desert Phantom. Everything can be verified. Blackwood stepped to the back of the cave with his encrypted satellite phone. The conversation that followed was terse, full of verification protocols and authentication codes that meant nothing to anyone without proper clearance. It took 7 minutes. When he returned, his expression had shifted from suspicion to something more complex. Concern mixed with calculation. She's legitimate, he told his team. CIA Special Activities Division. She's been operating in this region for 8 months, tracking a weapons trafficking network. Then what's she doing here? Foster asked. What's she doing with us? Blackwood looked at Tessa. You want to tell them, or should I? She pushed herself up, slightly grimacing at the pain in her leg. When she spoke, her voice was stronger now, no longer the frightened civilian. This was the voice of someone used to giving operational briefings. The drone that crashed wasn't an accident. Someone knew it was coming. They knew when, they knew where, and they knew what it was carrying. It was shot down deliberately. By who? Holden asked. A man named Nikolai Volkov, ex-Russian Spetsnaz, now running one of the most sophisticated weapons trafficking networks in the Western Hemisphere. He's been operating out of this region for 3 years, selling advanced military technology to cartels, terror groups, anyone with enough money. But he's been looking for something specific. something that would take his operation to the next level. The EMP prototype, Blackwood said quietly. Tessa nodded. The drone was carrying an experimental electromagnetic pulse device, compact, powerful, portable. In the wrong hands, it could disable every electronic system in a 50-kilometer radius. Power grids, communications vehicles, weapons systems, everything. Volkov has been waiting months for a chance to acquire technology like this. And someone gave him the intelligence, Webb said from his position by the cave entrance. Exactly. Someone in your chain of command, or someone with access to your operational planning, has been feeding Volkov information for at least 6 months. Every operation in this sector, every movement of personnel and equipment. That's how he knew about the drone. That's how he'll know you're coming for it. The implications settled over the team like a heavy blanket. Foster spoke up, his voice carefully neutral. And what about Lieutenant Mercer, the pilot? Do you know what happened to her? Tessa's expression darkened. Volkov has her. I saw his people extract her from the crash site yesterday. She's alive, but she won't be for long if he doesn't get what he wants. He'll use her to try to access the EMP's activation codes. And if she doesn't cooperate, she didn't need to finish the sentence. Blackwood activated his radio again, requesting a secure channel to command. This conversation took longer. 15 minutes of back and forth cross-referencing intelligence reports verifying classified information. When it ended, his jaw was tight. Command confirms multiple aspects of her intel. They've been tracking the same weapons network. They also confirmed the leak. 3 operations compromised in the past 4 months. Someone's been selling us out. He paused. And they confirmed Lieutenant Mercer is MIA, not KIA. Last known position suggests she was extracted from the crash site by hostile forces. How long does she have? Kowalski asked. Unknown. But Command wants the EMP technology recovered as primary objective. The pilot is secondary. The words hung in the air. Secondary. A human life reduced to a checkbox on a mission brief. That's bullshit, Webb said quietly. That's the job, Blackwood replied, but there was no conviction in his voice. Tessa spoke up. I can help you do both. I know Volkov's operation. I know his compound, his security, his patterns. I've spent 8 months infiltrating his network. That's why I was here. I was in an observation position on the ridge when your drone was shot down. I was gathering intelligence on a meeting between Volkov and cartel leadership. An observation position, Holden said slowly. You were doing Overwatch. Yes. That's a sniper's job. Something flickered across Tessa's face. Carefully controlled, but Holden caught it anyway. I was observing, not engaging. But you know how to engage, how to shoot. The question hung in the air. Tessa was quiet for a long moment, measuring them, deciding something. Then yes, I know how. Trained where? That's classified. Of course it is, Kowalski muttered. Everything about you is classified. Holden finished his medical assessment and began preparing proper splints and pain medication. The good news is there's no arterial damage. The break is clean. With proper support, she can be moved safely. The bad news is she needs real medical attention within 48 hours. That leg needs surgery. Blackwood studied his tactical map. Drone's last known position puts it 12 kilometers northeast of here, Dawn. Valley between 2 ridges, exposed terrain, minimal cover. If Volkov's people are converging on it, they'll be coming from multiple directions. Foster checked his communications equipment. Chief, I'm monitoring enemy frequencies. Multiple call signs. Based on the chatter, I estimate 30 to 40 hostiles converging on the crash site. They're coordinating in Russian, Spanish, and English. Professional operation. 40 against 6, and one of the 6 couldn't walk. This is a suicide mission, Kowalski said flatly. No, Tessa replied. It's a stealth mission. You don't fight them head on. You slip past them, secure the objective, and extract before they know you're there. Easy to say when you're not the one doing it. I've done it before, multiple times. Volkov's people are good, but they follow patterns. I've studied those patterns for 8 months. I can tell you where the gaps will be, where they'll focus their attention, and where they'll leave vulnerabilities. It wasn't much, but it was more than they had 5 minutes ago. As the team prepared to move out, Foster approached Blackwood quietly. Chief, I should mention something. That Border Hope initiative, I ran a check through Command's databases while we were talking. The organization exists and they do have people in this region, but there's no record of a Tessa Marlowe ever being associated with them. She already told us that was cover. I know. I'm just saying her cover was deep, really deep. The kind of cover that takes months to build. She wasn't just pretending to be with an NGO. She was fully embedded in their operations. That's serious tradecraft. Blackwood nodded. Foster was right. This woman, whoever she really was, had been playing a long game. The question was whether she was still playing it. The team moved out at dusk, crew carrying Tessa in the modified harness. By the time they reached the ridge overlooking the crash site, stars filled the desert sky. Through his scope, Blackwood counted 12 visible hostiles, 3 technical vehicles, and what looked like a specialized technical team already working on the drone's shattered fuselage. The one with the red markings on his vest, Tessa said quietly from her position beside Holden. That's Dmitri, ex-Spetsnaz, very dangerous. One of Volkov's most trusted operators. The other 2 working with him are Alexei and Yuri. Same background. Well, they know exactly what they're looking for and how to extract it. As they watched, the technical team worked with professional efficiency. Within 30 minutes, they'd removed several components from the drone's payload bay and loaded them into specially prepared cases. They're getting ready to move, Foster reported, monitoring the enemy communications. Convoy forming up. Looks like they're heading northeast. Toward the border, Tessa said. Volkov's main compound is 40 kilometers from here. Old copper mine built into the mountains. Soviet-era construction. That's where they'll take it for analysis. Blackwood faced the decision point. They could try to intercept the convoy here and now with terrible odds and minimal support. Or they could shadow it back to Volkov's compound and call in an airstrike. Neither option was good, but one was slightly less suicidal than the other. We follow them, he decided. Maintain visual contact, but stay out of engagement range. Foster, I want continuous updates to command. Everyone else prepare for a long night. We're going to be moving fast and quiet. As the convoy began to move, the team fell in behind, maintaining a distance of 2 kilometers. Far enough to avoid detection, close enough to maintain visual contact through night vision equipment. It was Tessa who kept them on track. Despite her pain, despite her exhaustion, she provided constant tactical updates. Shortcuts through the terrain, places where the convoy would slow down, allowing them to close distance, spots where they could risk using roads briefly to make up time. Her knowledge of the landscape was encyclopedic, unsettling. This wasn't the knowledge of someone who'd lived in a village for 8 months. This was the knowledge of someone who'd been conducting systematic reconnaissance, someone who'd been mapping terrain for tactical operations. Around midnight, exhaustion forced them to stop. Crew was spent from carrying Tessa. The rest of the team needed water and rest. Blackwood called a 10-minute halt in a depression that offered concealment. Holden immediately checked Tessa's vitals. How are you holding up? I'll make it. That's not what I asked. She looked at him in the darkness, her face barely visible in the starlight. I've been through worse. When where? That's classified. Holden pulled out a canteen and handed it to her. You know, there are a lot of things about you that are classified. Your training, your background, probably your real name. But here's what's not classified. You've got calluses from rifle work. You've got what looks like a Barrett scar on your shoulder. And you can spot hostiles at ranges that took me years of training to achieve. So either you're the most gifted intelligence analyst in CIA history, or you're something else entirely. Tessa drank from the canteen without responding at first. Then quietly, my father taught me to shoot when I was 10 years old. He was Marine Force Recon. We lived on a ranch in Montana. Every weekend we'd go out to the back 40 and he'd set up targets, longer and longer distances. By the time I was 16, I could put rounds on target at 1,200 meters. What happened to him? Iraq, 2012. He didn't come home. I'm sorry. Don't be. He died doing what he believed in. She shifted slightly, grimacing. After he died, I promised my mother I'd never pick up a rifle again. She'd always hated guns, hated what they'd taken from her, so I joined the Navy as a corpsman, decided to save lives instead of taking them. But CIA recruited you anyway. They recruited me because I had a skill set nobody else had, medical training and marksmanship, 2 things that don't usually go together. They asked if I'd be willing to use both for operations that nobody could know about. I said yes. And your mother still thinks I'm a corpsman assigned to a training command in California. It's better that way. The conversation ended as Blackwood called them to move, but Holden had his answer. Tessa Marlowe, whoever she really was, had been trained as an advanced sniper, and she'd been using those skills for the CIA for years. The question was what else she could do and whether they'd need to find out the hard way. The convoy reached Volkov's compound just before dawn. Blackwood's team positioned themselves on a ridge overlooking the complex, studying it through their scopes and night vision equipment. The compound was impressive and terrifying in equal measure. A network of buildings and cave entrances built into the mountainside, obviously Soviet-era construction, designed to withstand sustained military assault. Even in the pre-dawn darkness, they could see guard positions, defensive emplacements, overlapping fields of fire. This wasn't a criminal hideout. This was a military installation. There, Tessa said, pointing to a specific building with her good hand, that's the analysis center. See the power lines, the satellite dishes. Volkov will take the drone components there. It has the equipment he needs to understand what he's stolen. Blackwood studied the compound through his scope, counting guards, analyzing defensive positions. At least 30 armed men visible, with certainly more inside the buildings and caves. For a six-person team, even an elite SEAL team, a direct assault would be suicide. "We need air support," he said, reaching for his radio to call command. But the response from command wasn't what he wanted to hear. Negative on immediate air support. Weather system moving in from the west. All aircraft grounded for minimum 12 hours. Airstrike capability unavailable until conditions improve. 12 hours. By then, Volkov's technical team would have analyzed the EMP device, would know exactly what they had, would know its value, and would move it to a more secure location, probably across the border into Mexico, where U.S. forces couldn't reach it without creating an international incident. "We can't wait 12 hours, Tessa said urgently. "Once they understand what that technology is, they'll move it immediately. We'll lose it." "Then what do you suggest?" Blackwood asked, genuine frustration in his voice. "We're 6 people looking at a hardened compound with 40-plus hostiles. This isn't a movie. We can't just shoot our way in." Tessa studied the compound with analytical eyes, and Blackwood could almost see the calculations happening behind them. She was analyzing fields of fire approach, vectors, vulnerabilities, thinking like an operator, not an intelligence analyst. "The power substation," she said finally. "It's external to the main compound, about half a kilometer out. See it? If we destroy it during the analysis, Volkov will have to make a choice. Stop work and wait for repairs, or move the equipment to his backup facility where he can continue the analysis." "And Volkov's too greedy to stop," Holden said, understanding where she was going. "Exactly. He'll try to move the equipment immediately, and moving equipment means transport, and transport means exposure. We force him out of his fortress and hit him in the open on ground of our choosing." It was audacious, risky, but it played to their strengths. SEALs excelled at precision strikes and ambush tactics. They didn't need to assault a fortress. They just needed to force the enemy out of it. Blackwood looked at his team, saw exhaustion in their faces, saw uncertainty, but also saw determination. The understanding that this mission was bigger than any of them. "All right," he decided. "We do it Tessa's way. Kowalski crew, you handle the power station. Plant charges, demo it completely. Foster Wyatt, you set up overwatch positions along the most likely escape route. Webb, you're with me. We'll position for the ambush. Holden stays with Tessa in a secure position where she can provide intel without being exposed to direct fire." As the team prepared for the operation, Foster spoke up. "Chief, one more thing. I should be the one coordinating with command on airstrike vectors once we confirm the tech's location. My equipment has the range and encryption protocols for that kind of traffic." Blackwood nodded. "Good thinking. You coordinate fire support. But Foster, I want you checking in every 15 minutes. If we lose comms with you, for any reason, we abort and extract." "Clear." "Crystal, Chief." The attack began at midnight. Kowalski and crew moved through the darkness like shadows, their forms barely visible, even through night vision. The power substation sat half a kilometer from Volkov's compound, a utilitarian concrete structure, humming with electrical current. It was guarded but minimally. 2 men smoking cigarettes by the entrance rifles slung casually over their shoulders. They never saw death coming. Crew's blade found the first guard's throat before the man could drop his cigarette. Kowalski took the second with a suppressed shot that made no more sound than a cough. The bodies were dragged into shadows. The charges were set with practiced precision. C4 molded around critical junctions, timers synchronized to detonate simultaneously. 3 minutes of work, then they were gone, melting back into the desert darkness. The explosion lit up the night sky like a miniature sun. The substation disintegrated in a ball of orange flame, sending a shockwave that rattled windows in the compound half a kilometer away. Every light in Volkov's facility winked out simultaneously, plunging the complex into darkness. From their position on the ridge, Blackwood watched through his scope as chaos erupted below. Men running, shouted orders in Russian and Spanish, vehicle engines starting, emergency generators kicking in but providing only partial power. Within minutes, frantic radio communications filled the airwaves. Tessa listened through a handheld receiver, her face illuminated by its faint green glow. "They're panicking. Volkov is demanding to know what happened. His technical team is saying they need power to continue analyzing the EMP components. Good, Blackwood said. Now make the call. Tessa pulled out her encrypted satellite phone. Her fingers hesitated over the keys for just a moment, then she dialed a number from memory. The phone rang twice before a voice answered. Male accented, cold as winter steel. Dub. It's me, Tessa said. Her voice had changed, taken on an edge of familiarity that spoke of previous conversations of trust built over months. The Americans hit your power station. SEAL Team 6 operators. I managed to slip away when they extracted me from the village. There was a pause. Blackwood could feel the weight of suspicion in that silence. Where are you, Shaw? Safe house 2 kilometers west of your position. But I have intelligence on their positions. They're setting up an ambush on the northeast route. Classic L-shaped formation at the canyon choke point. They expect you to run that way. Another pause longer this time. How do I know this is not a trap? Because I've given you good intelligence for 8 months, Nikolai. Because I told you about the drone shipment in the first place. Because I'm the one who's kept you 3 steps ahead of American operations in this sector. She paused for effect. And because if this were a trap, I would have led them straight to your compound hours ago instead of giving you time to prepare. The silence stretched. Blackwood could almost hear the calculations happening on the other end of the line. What do they want? The EMP device. They're desperate to recover it, but they don't know about your secondary facility. If you move the package south through the canyon, they'll intercept at the choke point. You loop around through the old mining road, and you'll be across the border before they realize they're waiting for nothing. The lie was perfect. Detailed enough to be believable, strategic enough to seem valuable. She was feeding Volkov exactly what his ego needed to hear. You are certain of their position. I monitored their communications before I escaped. Northeast Canyon L formation, 6 operators. They're waiting for you. A grunt of acknowledgement. Good. You have earned your payment many times over. When this is finished, there will be a substantial bonus. I don't do this for money, Nikolai. No, you do this because you hate them. The ones who sent your brother to die for nothing. A dark chuckle. We are the same in that way, you and I. Revenge is more satisfying than money. Tessa's face remained impassive, but something flickered in her eyes. The cover story. The fiction that motivated her betrayal. Just make sure the package gets across the border safely. That's all that matters now. The call ended. Holden, who'd been monitoring from beside her, lowered his weapon slightly. Your brother, cover story, Tessa said quietly. Part of my legend. Volkov thinks I'm motivated by revenge against American intelligence. It's what made him trust me. Is any of it true? Does it matter? Before Holden could answer, Foster's voice crackled through the radio. Chief, I've got movement at the compound. 3 vehicles preparing to move out. Looks like they bought it. Blackwood adjusted his scope. 3 technical trucks, heavily armed guards loading into the beds, and in the center vehicle, carefully secured cargo cases. The EMP components. Where's the convoy heading? He asked. Foster consulted his tracking equipment. South-southeast. They're taking the mining road just like she said they would. The route would bring them directly through a narrow valley where Blackwood had positioned his team. Rocky walls on both sides, limited visibility, perfect killing ground. Volkov was driving straight into an ambush, believing he was avoiding one. All units stand by, Blackwood ordered. Let them enter the valley. Wait for my signal. Holden, you've got first shot. Disable the lead vehicle. Copy that, Chief. The team settled into position. Kowalski and crew had rejoined them, taking up firing positions behind a cluster of boulders that provided excellent cover and clear lines of fire. Webb positioned himself with his M240 machine gun ready to lay down devastating suppressing fire. Fisher maintained overwatch with his surveillance equipment, and Holden found his spot. A slight rise that gave him elevation advantage, his Barrett M82A1 resting on its bipod, the massive rifle stable and ready. At 36 years old, he'd made hundreds of combat shots. This should have been routine, but something felt wrong. The convoy was moving slowly, too slowly. The guards in the truck beds were alert, scanning the terrain with practiced vigilance weapons at the ready. And as Holden watched through his scope, he noticed something that made his stomach tighten. The lead vehicle had been modified. Additional armor plating, reinforced doors, bulletproof glass, run-flat tires. It wasn't just a technical truck. It was a hardened target prepared for exactly this kind of ambush. Chief, he said quietly into his radio, something's off. That lead vehicle is too well protected. This feels like... The world exploded. The hillside erupted with automatic weapons fire. Tracer rounds cut through the darkness like angry fireflies, creating a deadly light show that turned night into day. Rounds impacted all around their positions, chewing up rock and earth, sending fragments of stone spinning through the air like shrapnel. And Holden, exposed in his elevated sniper position, became the primary target. He tried to move, tried to pull back, to cover, but the Barrett was heavy 30 pounds of rifle and optics that couldn't be abandoned without losing their only long-range capability. As he grabbed for it, preparing to drag it to safety, a burst of automatic fire tore across his position. The first round hit his right shoulder, the second his arm. The third struck the Barrett itself, the rifle stock shattering under the impact of a 7.62 round. Holden went down hard, the breath driven from his lungs by pain and shock. He rolled behind the rocks, gasping, trying to key his radio with his left hand, while his right arm hung useless and screaming. Contact, contact. We're compromised. They knew we were here. The realization hit Blackwood like a physical blow. This wasn't an ambush, it was a counter-ambush. Volkov hadn't bought Tess's misdirection. He'd seen through it, or worse, had been expecting it. His forces had been waiting in positions flanking the valley, ready to spring the trap. All units fall back, Blackwood ordered. Leapfrog retreat, covering fire. But falling back meant abandoning the high ground, and the enemy had brought overwhelming numbers. Through the chaos of gunfire and shouted orders, Blackwood counted at least 20 hostiles, possibly more. His team was caught in a crossfire with an injured operator and dwindling ammunition. Fisher took fire next. A round caught him in the chest, his body armor absorbing most of the impact, but cracking ribs and driving the air from his lungs. He collapsed behind a boulder, gasping like a fish out of water, unable to breathe or call for help. Webb's machine gun chattered, laying down suppressing fire, but for every hostile he forced into cover, two more appeared. They were being systematically overwhelmed by sheer numbers and superior positioning. And then Blackwood saw the real threat. 800 meters across the valley, barely visible in the darkness, a muzzle flash. Then another. Enemy sniper positioned perfectly to pick off his team one by one with precision fire. Even as he watched, another shot rang out across the valley. The round missed Kowalski by inches, striking the rock beside his head and sending stone fragments into his face. He jerked back, blood streaming from cuts across his cheek and forehead. Sniper 800 meters, 11 o'clock high, Blackwood shouted into his radio, but there was nothing they could do about it. Holden was down his shoulder, destroyed his Barrett stock, shattered and useless. They had no counter-sniper capability. No way to suppress a target at that range in the dark. They were sitting ducks, being picked apart by a professional who was taking his time making every shot count. Another shot echoed across the valley. This one found crew catching him in the left leg and dropping him with a scream of pain and rage. The enemy sniper was methodical, professional, calm, taking his time with each shot, finding targets, adjusting for wind and distance and darkness. In 90 seconds, he'd taken 3 of Blackwood's operators out of the fight. Then Foster's voice came through the radio, and something about it made Blackwood's blood run cold. "Chief, you need to fall back. This position is compromised." The tone was wrong, too calm, too measured, like someone delivering a situation report rather than fighting for their life. "Foster, where are you?" A pause. Too long. I'm pinned down on the eastern ridge, taking fire." But that wasn't where Foster should be. Foster should be on the western ridge with his communications equipment coordinating with command. Blackwood's mind raced through the possibilities, then landed on a terrible conclusion. "Foster, what did you do?" Another pause. And when Foster spoke again, his voice had changed entirely. No longer the helpful teammate, now cold, professional, almost apologetic. "I'm sorry, Chief, but Volkov pays better than Uncle Sam, and he pays in advance. You understand." The betrayal hit like a sledgehammer to the chest. Foster, their newest team member, the one who transferred in 3 months ago with stellar reviews, the one who always volunteered for extra duty, the one who'd been handling their communications with command this entire time. Foster was the leak, not someone in the chain of command back in the States. One of their own, a SEAL who'd sold out his brothers for money. "You son of a bitch," Kowalski snarled into the radio. "Nothing personal, Kowalski. Just business. You guys don't get paid enough for what you do. I found someone willing to pay what I'm worth." Through his scope, Blackwood saw movement on the eastern ridge, Foster moving with 3 men in contractor tactical gear. They'd been waiting in ambush, positioned by someone who knew exactly where the SEAL team would set up their positions, someone who'd fed Volkov every detail of their operation. "How long?" Blackwood demanded. "How long have you been selling us out?" "Since before I transferred to your team. Volkov recruited me 6 months ago, made me an offer I couldn't refuse. All I had to do was provide some intel, make sure certain operations went sideways at the right times. Easy money, Chief. Easier than getting shot at for a paycheck that barely covers rent. The enemy sniper fired again, and this time the round found Webb. The machine gunner took a hit to the leg, his weapon falling silent as he dropped behind cover, cursing and trying to stem the bleeding. They were being systematically destroyed, and the man who was supposed to be coordinating their support had sold them out. Foster, when I get my hands on you, Blackwood started. You won't, Chief. I'm extracting with Volkov's people. By tomorrow, I'll be across the border with more money than you'll make in 10 years. Nothing personal, just capitalism. The radio went silent. Blackwood made the calculation every combat leader dreads. They couldn't win this fight. They were outgunned, outmaneuvered, and betrayed from within. They needed to extract. Now, before everyone ended up dead or captured. Prepare to fall back on my no. The voice was quiet but carried absolute authority. Blackwood turned to see Tessa pulling herself upright, using a boulder for support. Her broken leg was still splinted, her face pale with pain and blood loss. But her eyes were focused with laser intensity on the enemy position across the valley. What are you doing? Blackwood demanded. What I should have done from the start. She looked at Holden sprawled behind cover with blood soaking through his tactical vest. Can you shoot? Holden tried to lift his shattered right arm, gasped in agony, fell back. No, shoulders destroyed, can't hold the weapon, can't aim, can't do anything. Then I need your rifle. It's broken, stock shattered. Is the barrel intact? The optics. Holden looked at the Barrett lying beside him. The stock was indeed destroyed, making it impossible to shoulder the weapon properly. But the barrel appeared undamaged. Optics seem functional, but without the stock support you can't. I've done it before. She began moving toward the rifle, dragging her splinted leg using rocks and equipment for support. Every movement cost her, but she didn't slow down. Blackwood started to protest, started to order her back, but something in her expression stopped him. This wasn't the careful intelligence officer anymore. This was someone else entirely. Someone who'd been waiting for this moment. Tessa reached the Barrett and dropped beside it. The stock was shattered beyond use, making traditional shooting impossible. But she didn't try to shoulder it. Instead, she positioned herself prone, wedging what remained of the broken stock against a rock for stability, using her body weight and the boulder to compensate for the missing support structure. Her hands moved over the rifle with practiced familiarity. Every adjustment precise, every movement economical. She checked the optics, made a minute correction to the scope, worked the heavy bolt action to chamber a .50 caliber round. Tessa, you can't make that shot, Blackwood said, genuine concern in his voice now. 800 meters in the dark with a damaged rifle and no proper stock support. That's not just difficult, that's impossible. She didn't answer. Her breathing had changed, become rhythmic and controlled. 4 seconds in through the nose, 7 seconds held, 8 seconds out through the mouth. A specific pattern taught in advanced sniper schools. A pattern designed to lower heart rate and steady aim even under extreme stress. Through the scope, she found the enemy a sniper. He was good, she could see that immediately. Positioned in a natural depression that provided cover from return fire while offering a perfect vantage point over the kill zone. He was settling in for another shot, his rifle tracking slowly toward where Kowalski crouched behind inadequate cover. Tessa's finger found the trigger. The Barrett's trigger pull was heavy, 9 to 10 pounds of pressure required to release the firing pin. With a broken stock and improvised position, the recoil would be devastating. It would probably dislocate her shoulder again, might break her collarbone, could knock her unconscious from the shock. She didn't care. The mathematical calculations ran through her mind, automatically, instinctively, the product of thousands of hours of training and hundreds of real-world shots. 820 meters to target. Crosswind light, but present, maybe 5 miles per hour left to right. Target at slightly higher elevation, requiring adjustment for the upward angle. Temperature cold for desert air, relatively dense rounds would fly marginally flatter. The Barrett fired .50 BMG rounds, massive bullets that could punch through engine blocks. At this range, with proper hold and proper breathing, they were accurate enough. If she could make the shot, her father's voice echoed in her memory. Words he'd spoken on a Montana ranch 15 years ago. Steady hands, Tessa. Control your breathing. Let your heart rate drop. And when everything is quiet inside you, that's when you squeeze. Her finger tightened on the trigger. Slow, gradual pressure. No jerking, no pulling, just steady, increasing force until the rifle roared. The recoil was catastrophic. Even wedged against the rock, the Barrett tried to tear itself from her grip. The force drove backward into her injured shoulder like being hit with a baseball bat swung by a giant. Pain so intense that black spots danced across her vision. She felt something tear in her chest cavity, felt blood filling her mouth where she bit completely through her bottom lip. But she kept her eye to the scope. 820 meters away, the bullet impacted rock 3 feet to the right of the target. A miss. The enemy sniper flinched at the near miss, rolled away from his position, scrambled for new cover 30 meters away. Tessa's team stared in shock. Not because she'd missed, because she'd come within 3 feet of an 820-meter shot in the dark with a broken rifle and catastrophic injuries while under fire. "Holy shit," Kowalski whispered. But Tessa wasn't finished. Blood ran from her mouth. Her hands shook from pain and shock. Her vision swam from the concussive force of the recoil. But she was already working the bolt action, her fingers moving with muscle memory, older than conscious thought, chambering another .50 caliber round. The enemy sniper had moved to a new position, thinking he had time, thinking the first shot had been luck or desperation or a Hail Mary from an amateur who'd gotten lucky. He was wrong about all of it. Tessa found him through the scope, made her adjustments. The movement had actually helped her. Now she knew the wind with certainty, knew how it would push the massive round during its flight. She knew the exact distance, knew the elevation. 4 seconds in, 7 seconds hold, 8 seconds out. "Steady hands," she whispered, her father's voice mixing with her own. "Both skills when you need them." She fired. This time the round flew true. 820 meters, a perfect ballistic arc. The 50 caliber bullet covering the distance in less than a second. The round struck the enemy sniper center mass with devastating force, the impact so powerful it lifted him off his feet and threw him backward 3 meters into the rocks. The hostile fire faltered immediately. Confusion rippled through the enemy positions like a shockwave. Their ace, their sniper, their insurance policy had just been eliminated by a shot that shouldn't have been possible. But Tessa's body had taken all it could take. The second recoil had been too much. She collapsed behind the Barrett, blood pooling beneath her from internal injuries caused by the brutal recoil trauma. Her vision was fading, her breathing shallow, but she'd done what needed to be done. The enemy broke. Whatever confidence they'd had evaporated in the face of precision fire from an unknown sniper who could make impossible shots under impossible conditions. They pulled back, retreating to their vehicles, laying down covering fire as they withdrew. Foster's voice came through one last time, panic evident now. "Volkov, we need to abort. They've got a sniper we didn't account for. We need to—" The transmission cut off abruptly as Foster realized his radio was still broadcasting on the SEAL team's frequency. "Pursue," Blackwood ordered, seeing the opportunity. "Don't let them escape with that tech." The SEAL team pressed their advantage, despite their wounds. Webb got his machine gun working again, pouring fire into the retreating enemy positions. Kowalski and crew, both injured but functional, moved to flank the convoy. Blackwood himself led the assault, his rifle barking in controlled bursts. The enemy convoy tried to escape, but Webb's machine gun fire tore through their tires. Kowalski's grenades disabled their engines. Within 5 brutal minutes of close quarters combat, it was over. The hostiles who weren't dead had surrendered or fled into the desert on foot. The cargo cases containing the EMP components sat in the back of a destroyed truck, intact and ready for recovery. But Blackwood wasn't looking at the victory. He was looking at Tessa. Holden had crawled to her side despite his own injuries, his medical training overriding everything else, even his own pain. Tessa, stay with me." Her eyes focused on him with difficulty. Did we get it?" "Yeah, we got it. Now shut up and let me work." His hands moved over her quickly, efficiently, assessing damage. The shoulder was dislocated again, possibly fractured in multiple places this time. Internal bleeding from the repeated recoil trauma. The broken leg was worse, the splint having failed under the stress of her movements. She'd pushed a badly injured body far beyond its limits, and now she was paying the price. But she was alive. Barely, but alive. As Holden worked to stabilize her, crew approached Blackwood. In his hands was something he'd found in the wreckage of one of the vehicles. A tablet computer, military grade, its screen cracked but still functional. "Chief, you need to see this." Blackwood took the tablet, his expression darkening as he scrolled through the files. CIA operational documents, intelligence summaries, asset reports, and photographs, dozens of photographs of Tessa. But not Tessa, the logistics coordinator. Not Tessa, the intelligence analyst. These were operational photographs. Tessa in full tactical gear. Tessa with precision rifles. Tessa making shots in what were obviously combat situations. and a file designation that made his blood run cold. Ghost Tier 1 Sniper Asset, Status K. Aya Operation Sandstorm, Yemen, 2022. Below that, a detailed operational history. 52 confirmed eliminations over a 4-year career. Terrorists, weapons dealers, warlords, enemy combatants, all eliminated with precision fire at ranges that most snipers couldn't even imagine attempting. The longest shot on record, 1,640 meters. A Somali warlord killed from over a mile away in wind conditions that should have made the shot impossible. And at the bottom of the file, a note in red text, asset burned during Operation Sandstorm, death faked to protect identity and enable deep cover operations. Current assignment, deep penetration, Volkov Weapons Network. Authorized use of lethal force as mission requires. Crew had been reading over Blackwood's shoulder. Chief, she's not just CIA. She's one of their ghosts, the operators who don't officially exist, the ones who do the jobs that can't ever be acknowledged. Blackwood looked down at Tessa's unconscious form, at this small, broken woman who had just made legendary shots while bleeding out, who had infiltrated enemy networks for months, who had saved his entire team with skills that shouldn't exist in a single operator. And someone had betrayed her. Someone had given these files to Volkov, exposing her identity to the very people she was hunting. How did Volkov get these files? He asked quietly. Crew tapped the tablet, navigating through directories. There's a communication log here. Someone's been feeding him classified information for months. Operational plans, asset identities, mission timelines. And Chief, the access level required for these files. This goes way beyond Foster. This is someone with serious clearance. Someone in SOCOM or maybe higher. The implications were staggering. Foster had been a field operative, a trader selling tactical information. But someone else, someone higher up the chain, had been providing strategic intelligence, had been selling out American assets for money or ideology or simple corruption. Blackwood activated his encrypted radio. Sierra 3 actual to command. We have secured the primary objective. Multiple casualties requiring immediate medical evacuation. Priority Alpha. Authorization code Blackbird. The response was swift. Helicopters inbound ETA 20 minutes. While they waited, Holden found something in Tessa's tactical vest. A letter old and worn, folded so many times the creases had begun to tear. He pulled it out carefully, saw the date, March 15th, 2012. And a name written in precise military block letters, Colonel Garrett Marlowe, USMC. Chief, there's a letter. Looks personal. Leave it, that's private. It's marked, to be opened in the event of my death. Chief, I think her father wanted people to read this if something happened to her. Blackwood hesitated, then nodded. Read it. Holden unfolded the letter with care, his hand still shaking slightly from his own injuries and the adrenaline crash. He read aloud, his voice steady despite everything. My dearest Tessa, if you're reading this, then I didn't make it home from Iraq. I'm sorry, baby girl. I'm sorry I won't be there to walk you down the aisle someday, or meet your children, or teach them to shoot the way I taught you. I want you to understand something. I taught you marksmanship because I wanted you to be strong, capable, never a victim. But I never wanted you to become a killer. There's a difference between being able to do something and choosing to do it. Your mother is terrified of guns. Always has been. The day I shipped out, she made me promise that if anything happened to me, I wouldn't let my death turn you into a soldier. She wanted you to heal people, not harm them. To save lives, not take them. I'm asking you to keep that promise for me. I know you have a gift. I've never seen a natural shooter like you in my 20 years in the Corps. By the time you were 16, you could outshoot men who'd been doing this professionally for decades. That kind of talent is rare, special. But talent isn't destiny, Tessa. You get to choose what you do with it. If the day comes when you have to break this promise, when you have to pick up a rifle and do what I taught you to do, I need you to remember something important. You don't do it for revenge. You don't do it for glory. You don't do it just because you're good at it. You do it only when there's no other choice. Only when lives hang in the balance. Only when healing isn't enough and fighting becomes necessary. I always told you both skills, Tessa. Remember, heal when you can, fight when you must, but always, always remember which should come first. I love you, baby girl. I'm proud of you. Not because you can shoot, but because you have a good heart. Don't lose that. No matter what happens in your life, no matter what choices you have to make, don't lose your heart. All my love, Dad. P.S. I left you my rifle. The Barrett I used in the service. Your mother will want to get rid of it, but I'm asking you to keep it. Not to use it, just to remember me by. And maybe someday, when you're old and have grandchildren, You can tell them about the old Marine who taught you to shoot on a Montana ranch. That's all the legacy I need. The silence that followed was profound. Even the distant sounds of the firefight's aftermath seemed muted, as if the desert itself was paying respects. Holden carefully refolded the letter and placed it back in Tessa's vest, his eyes wet despite his best efforts to maintain professional composure. She broke her promise, he said quietly. Her father asked her to be a healer, and she became a killer instead. No, Blackwood replied, his voice firm but gentle. She became both. That's what makes her different. She didn't choose killing over healing. She integrated them. She spent years as a corpsman saving lives. 50-plus combat saves, according to her military record. 50 men who went home to their families because of her medical skills. And then when healing wasn't enough, when her country needed her to fight, she did that too. With everything she had. The sound of helicopter rotors echoed across the valley. Two Blackhawks incoming their searchlights, cutting through the darkness. As the medical team loaded Tessa onto a stretcher, Blackwood stood over her unconscious form. This woman had saved his team, had made impossible shots under impossible conditions, had proven herself 100 times over. But more than that, she'd kept her father's real lesson. She hadn't chosen one path or the other. She'd walked both. Healer when she could be, warrior when she had to be. That's what made her extraordinary. The helicopter lifted off, carrying Tessa toward medical care. The second helicopter transported Holden, Fisher, and crew. Webb and Kowalski, the walking wounded, would extract with Blackwood in the recovered EMP technology. As they flew through the night sky, Blackwood accessed his secure communications and sent a message directly to CIA headquarters. It was time for answers. Time to know who had betrayed one of their best operators. Time to understand how deep this conspiracy went. But those answers would have to wait. For now, all that mattered was that his team was alive. The technology was secured. And a woman who had been presumed dead had proven herself to be very much alive, very much dangerous, and very much on their side. Below them, the desert stretched out endlessly. Somewhere in that darkness, Nikolai Volkov was regrouping, understanding that he'd just lost a major engagement to a force he'd underestimated. And somewhere, Foster was running, trying to reach safety, trying to escape justice for his betrayal. But the SEAL community had long memories, and traitors never stayed hidden forever. The war wasn't over. It was just beginning. But for tonight, flying through the cold desert air with wounded operators and recovered technology, Blackwood allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. They'd won this round. Against terrible odds with catastrophic casualties, they'd accomplished the impossible. And they'd done it because a small blonde woman with a broken leg and her father's rifle had remembered a lesson taught on a Montana ranch 15 years ago. Heal when you can, fight when you must, and never forget which comes first. 3 days later, Tessa woke in a hospital in San Diego. The smell of antiseptic, the sound of monitors beeping, the soft fluorescent light that marked every military medical facility. Her body was wrapped in bandages. Her left leg was elevated in traction. Every breath hurt, every movement sent lightning bolts of pain through her chest and shoulder. But she was alive. Commander Reese Blackwood sat in a chair beside her bed looking like he hadn't slept in 72 hours, which she would later learn was exactly accurate. "Welcome back," he said quietly. Tessa's throat was desert dry. "How long?" 3 days. "You had surgery on your leg, pins, plates, screws. The orthopedic surgeon said you'll walk again, but it's going to take months of physical therapy, maybe a year before you're back to full capability." He paused. "Your shoulder was dislocated and fractured in multiple places. They had to do reconstructive work. You also had internal bleeding from the recoil trauma. Collapsed lung, broken ribs. You're lucky to be alive, Tessa. The others, Holden's shoulder is destroyed. The damage was too extensive. He'll never snipe again, but they saved the arm. Full function for everything except the fine motor control needed for precision shooting. Fisher's ribs are cracked but healing. He'll be back to full duty in 6 weeks. Crew took a round clean through the calf muscle. Painful but no permanent damage. He's already walking. Webb's leg wound was superficial. Kowalski's face looks like he lost a fight with a cheese grater, but he'll be fine once the cuts heal." Relief washed over her. Everyone had made it, damaged but alive. The EMP device, secured and on its way back to the research facility. Whatever Volkov was planning, it's over. Blackwood leaned forward, his expression serious. "But we need to talk about something else. Something that came through on the intelligence channels this morning." The way he said it made her stomach tighten. "What?" He pulled out a tablet and played a video. The image quality was poor, shot in low light, but clear enough. A woman in a flight suit, face bruised and bloody, tied to a chair in what looked like a concrete room. Behind her stood a man Tessa recognized immediately, Nikolai Volkov. "Good evening," Volkov said to the camera, his English precise despite his accent. "I believe you are looking for this woman." Lieutenant Mercer has been very uncooperative about providing activation codes for the technology we recovered. But I am a patient man, and I have methods that are very persuasive. The video showed Sloane's face. She was trying to be brave, trying to maintain military bearing despite obvious torture. But fear showed in her eyes, the kind of deep animal fear that came from knowing worse was coming. "You have 12 hours, Volkov continued. "Return what you stole from me or I will kill her, slowly, and I will send you pieces until you comply. The choice is yours." The video ended. Tessa stared at the blank screen. "Command told you she was KYA when we started this mission. They were wrong, or they were operating on bad intelligence. Or," Blackwood's jaw tightened, "or they knew she was alive and decided the EMP technology was more important than one pilot's life." The cold calculation of it made Tessa's blood boil. "I called it in immediately," Blackwood continued. "Requested permission to mount a rescue operation. Command denied it. They said the technology is more valuable than one life. They're authorizing an airstrike on Volkov's compound in 6 hours, whether Sloane Mercer is there or not." Tessa tried to sit up, gasped at the pain fell back. "They're going to kill her." "Not if I can help it." Blackwood met her eyes. "I can't order my team to go back in there. Half of them are in hospital beds. It would be a suicide mission with no official support. But I also can't just leave her to die. I can't do that." "How many operators can you field?" "3. Myself, Kowalski, and Webb. Everyone else is too damaged or too compromised by their injuries. 3 operators to assault a hardened compound with 40 hostiles. I know the math. That's why I'm not ordering anyone to do this. But if you had intelligence that could help, if you knew a way in that didn't involve a frontal assault." He left the question hanging. Tessa was quiet for a long moment. Her body screamed at her to stay in bed, to heal, to let someone else handle this. But she could see Sloane's face in her mind, see the fear, see the knowledge that help might not be coming. She'd made a promise when she joined the CIA, not a promise to her mother this time, a promise to herself, that she would use her skills to protect people who couldn't protect themselves, that she would fight when fighting was necessary. This was necessary. "I can get you in," she said finally, "and I can get the pilot out, but you have to trust me completely. No questions, no second guessing, and you have to be willing to let me go back to Volkov. Back to him, Tessa. He knows you compromised his operation. He'll torture you for information, then kill you. No, he'll want to know how much damage I did first, who I told, what I know about his network. He'll want intelligence before he kills me." She met Blackwood's eyes. "And that gives us a window, small but enough. This is insane. This is the job." She tried to sit up again, managed it this time despite the pain. "Get me out of this hospital. I'll show you how it's done." Blackwood was silent for a long moment, weighing options, calculating odds. Finally, he nodded. "What do you need at 30 minutes with a secure phone, Spam? Someone who can get me out of here without the doctors noticing. And pain medication. A lot of it. The doctors say you can't walk. You need at least 2 more weeks of bed rest. The doctors don't know what I can do when I have to." She looked at her elevated leg, at the traction equipment, at the monitors that were supposed to keep her imprisoned in this bed. "I've worked through worse. Get me what I need, Commander. We've got a pilot to save." 6 hours later, Tessa sat in the back of an unmarked van, her leg in a heavy walking cast, her body held together by painkillers and sheer determination. The medication made everything soft around the edges, but the pain still found ways through. Beside her, Kowalski checked his weapons with methodical care, his face still marked by the cuts from stone fragments, but his eyes clear and focused. In the front, Webb drove while Blackwood coordinated what little support they could muster, without official authorization. "You really think he'll buy this?" Kowalski asked, not for the first time. "He'll want to," Tessa replied. "Volkov's ego won't let him believe I could truly betray him without a good reason. He'll convince himself that I can be turned back, that I'm just confused or coerced. It's what men like him always do. And when he realizes you're playing him, that's why you'll be there." The plan was simple in concept and nearly impossible in execution. Tessa would call Volkov, claim she'd escaped American custody offer to trade information about SEAL operations for safe passage out of the country. She'd bring Kowalski as proof, claiming he was willing to defect in exchange for money. Volkov would be suspicious, but he'd also be curious, and curiosity would get them through the door. After that, it was pure improvisation. The van stopped at a predetermined location 5 kilometers from Volkov's compound. Tessa pulled out her encrypted phone and dialed a number she'd memorized months ago, but never thought she'd use again. It rang 4 times before Volkov answered, his voice wary. I wondered if I would hear from you again. I need extraction. The Americans know everything. They're planning an airstrike on your facility in 4 hours. How convenient for you to warn me. How did you escape from them? I didn't escape. They released me, pulled me out of the hospital and tried to use me against you, but I managed to slip away. She paused for effect. I'm burned, Nikolai, completely compromised. I need safe passage to Moscow, new identity, payment for services rendered over the past 8 months. There was a long silence. She could almost hear him calculating, weighing probabilities, trying to decide if this was real or trap. You failed me, Tessa. The technology was stolen. My operation compromised. Why should I trust you now? Because I have something you want. A SEAL team operator willing to provide detailed intelligence on American special operations in exchange for asylum and money. And because I can tell you exactly how the Americans plan to strike your compound. Timing approach vectors everything. Another pause, even longer this time. Where are you, bro? Checkpoint 7, the same place we used for operational meetings before. I'll come in alone with the prisoner. But if you try anything, I've arranged for all my intelligence files to be dumped to American authorities automatically. Everything I know about your network, every contact, every account number, every operation. You'll be exposed completely. You would burn yourself to hurt me. I would burn everything to survive. That's what you taught me. Remember survival above all else, ma'am. A low chuckle, but it held no warmth. Very well. Come to checkpoint 7. Bring your prisoner. But Tessa, if this is a trap, I will make you beg for death before I grant it. This I promise you. I know. I'll see you in 30 minutes. The call ended. Kowalski looked at her with something between respect and concern. You're really good at this. The lying, I mean. Thank you. I didn't mean it as a compliment. I know. Checkpoint 7 was exactly as she remembered. Small outpost, 2 guards, portable radio, clear line of sight to the main compound. She and Kowalski approached with hands visible. Kowalski's wrists bound with zip ties designed to look secure, but could be snapped with minimal effort. The guards recognized Tessa immediately. One spoke rapidly into his radio, while the other kept his rifle trained on them, finger on the trigger, professional and alert. Within 5 minutes, a vehicle arrived. In the back seat sat Dmitry Volkov's head of security. His face was a professional mask of suspicion as he studied them both. Searched them, thoroughly. The guards were meticulous, patted them down, checked every pocket, every fold of clothing. They found nothing because there was nothing to find. No weapons, no communication devices, no hidden trackers. Tessa had come exactly as promised, unarmed and vulnerable. The American, Dmitry said, moving closer to Kowalski. You are really SEAL. SEAL Team 3 2nd Platoon, Kowalski replied, his voice flat and bitter. Stationed out of Coronado. Been serving for 11 years, and what do I have to show for it? A government paycheck that barely covers rent and a body that's breaking down from too many deployments. Your commander, Reese Blackwood, commander, 22 years of service. Good man, too good. Still believes in the mission and serving your country and all that honor and duty bullshit. Kowalski let contempt drip into his voice. But I'm done being a patriot. I want to get paid what I'm worth for once in my life. It was a good performance. Just the right amount of bitterness, just enough detail to be believable. Dmitry studied him for another moment, then nodded slowly. Volkov will decide if you live or die. Get in the vehicle. The ride to the compound was silent. Tessa memorized details, updated her mental map of the facility. Guard positions had changed again. New defensive emplacements. Volkov was learning, adapting. They were taken deep into the cave system to a large room with concrete walls and harsh fluorescent lighting. Interrogation room or execution chamber. The outcome would depend on the next few minutes. Volkov entered 5 minutes later. He looked exactly as she remembered. Tall, lean, dangerous. Pale blue eyes that missed nothing. When he looked at Tessa, she saw genuine hurt mixed with his professional suspicion. Tessa, he said softly, you have disappointed me greatly. I did what I had to do. No, you did what they told you to do. That is different. He began to circle the table slowly, a predator studying prey. For 8 months, you were part of my organization. I trusted you with operational details, valued your counsel, shared meals with you. and all along you were gathering intelligence to use against me. I was doing my job. As am I. He stopped circling, stood directly in front of her. Tell me something. When we talked about our lives, about our motivations, about why we do what we do, was any of that real? Or was it all performance? The question was genuine, and it caught her off guard. She'd expected threats, intimidation, violence. Not this, not genuine curiosity about her motivations. Some of it was real, she admitted. The respect I had for your operational discipline, your attention to detail, your strategic thinking. Those things were genuine. You're very good at what you do, but not the loyalty. No, not the loyalty. Volkov nodded as if this confirmed something he'd suspected. Then he turned to Kowalski, pulled out his Makarov PM and chambered around. And you, why should I believe you are not also a spy, that this is not simply another layer of their deception? Because I'm here, Kowalski said. If I was working with them, they'd have come in shooting by now. But I'm alone, unarmed, and offering intelligence that could save your operation. That's not how spies work. It is exactly how spies work. They offer small truths to hide larger lies. Volkov aimed the gun at Kowalski's head. So I will ask you direct questions. If I detect any deception, any hesitation, I will kill you immediately. Then I will kill Tessa. Then I will kill the pilot I have imprisoned. Do you understand? Yeah, I understand. Tell me about the airstrike. Timing, approach vectors, ordnance. Tessa spoke before Kowalski could answer. 4 hours from now, 2 F-16s with precision-guided munitions. They'll approach from the northwest using the mountain ridge to mask their approach until the last second. Primary target is the eastern building where you do your technical analysis. Secondary target is the vehicle storage cave. They want to destroy your operational capability and trap you here while ground forces move in for mop-up. Volkov listened without lowering the gun. How do you know this? Because I was conscious during their planning meeting. They thought I was sedated from surgery, but I heard every word. They'd already decided I was compromised, burned expendable. They were planning the strike, whether I was in your custody or not. The gun stayed level for 10 more seconds. Then Volkov lowered it slowly. You are telling the truth. I can always tell when you tell the truth, Tessa. He holstered the weapon. I will evacuate my facility before the airstrike. But first I want to know something. The SEAL team that attacked my convoy 3 days ago. How many operators? This was the test, the moment when Tessa had to sell the lie completely. 6 operators, standard SEAL team composition, good training but not exceptional. They got lucky with their ambush positioning. Lucky. Volkov pulled out a tablet and showed her surveillance footage from the firefight. The video clearly showed Tessa making the impossible shot with the broken Barrett, working the bolt action, acquiring a second target, firing again. She'd been made, completely and utterly exposed. Volkov's smile was cold as winter. That is not luck, Tessa. That is expert marksmanship, made under combat conditions with a damaged weapon by someone with extensive advanced training. He leaned closer. So I will ask you again, and this time I want the truth. Who are you really? Before Tessa could answer, alarms blared throughout the compound. Emergency lights flashed red, shouted orders echoed through the cave system. Dmitri burst into the room, his professional composure cracked by genuine alarm. Sir, incoming aircraft, 2 helicopters, American military. They're not waiting for the airstrike. They're assaulting now. Volkov's eyes never left Tessa's face. You brought them here. No, I swear I didn't. My sire wanted them. But she understood even as she said it. Blackwood hadn't trusted the plan completely, had positioned an assault force's backup ready to hit if things went wrong. And now everything was falling apart. Gunfire erupted from multiple directions. Explosions shook the cave system, sending dust cascading from the ceiling. The sound of helicopter rotors filled the air along with the distinctive chatter of American machine guns. Volkov grabbed Tessa by the throat, his grip iron-strong and choking. Where is the pilot? What? She gasped. The American pilot, Sloan Mercer. You came for her, didn't you? Your SEALs are here for her. His grip tightened. I have been in this business for 20 years. I know a rescue operation when I see one. And you are the key to finding her. So I will make this very simple. Tell me who you really are and what you can really do, or I will kill her right now, immediately, and send her body to your commander. The choice was binary and brutal. Maintain her cover and let Sloan die, or reveal herself and gamble that it would somehow help. She chose truth. My name is Tessa Marlowe, CIA Special Activities Division, designation Ghost, and I'm here to kill you and save that pilot. Volkov's eyes widened with genuine shock. Ghost, the sniper who was killed in Yemen. You are supposed to be dead. I was. For 2 years, that was the point. He released her throat, stepped back. For the first time since she'd known him, Nikolai Volkov looked genuinely impressed. 52 confirmed eliminations, the longest recorded shot by an American operator. You are a legend in certain circles. Some people say you don't even exist, that you're a myth created by American intelligence to frighten their enemies. I'm real enough. The firefight outside was intensifying. Blackwood's voice boomed over loudspeakers demanding the release of the American pilot and threatening total destruction if they didn't comply. Webb's machine gun laid down devastating suppressing fire. Volkov pulled out his phone and made a call, spoke rapidly in Russian. When he ended it, his smile had returned, but now it held a different quality. Anticipation. I have ordered my men to bring the pilot here. To this room. We will wait together for your SEALs to arrive. And then I will give your commander a choice. The pilot's life for the technology he stole. We will see how much America values its people. 2 minutes later, guards dragged in a woman in a torn flight suit. Sloan Mercer looked worse than she had in the video. More bruises, more blood. Barely conscious from whatever they'd done to her. They threw her on the concrete floor at Volkov's feet. Here is your pilot, Volkov said, drawing his Makarov again and aiming it at Sloan's head. Now we wait, and when your friends arrive, they will watch her die unless they give me what I want. But Kowalski had been silent long enough. The zip ties snapped with a sharp crack. His hands, supposedly bound, came free. In one fluid motion, born of thousands of hours of training, he drew a ceramic knife that had been hidden in his boot, ceramic undetectable by the security search, and lunged at the nearest guard. The blade found the guard's throat. The man went down in a spray of arterial blood. Dmitri reacted instantly, his own weapon coming up, but Kowalski was already moving, using the dying guard's body as a shield, reaching for the fallen rifle. Volkov swung his Makarov toward Kowalski, but Tessa launched herself at him, despite her broken leg, despite her injuries, despite the certain knowledge that this might kill her. They crashed to the ground together, grappling for the gun. Volkov was stronger, better trained in hand-to-hand combat, and he wasn't carrying a broken leg and internal injuries. But Tessa had something he didn't: desperation. Her thumb found his eye pressed hard. He screamed, jerked back. The gun clattered across the concrete floor. Kowalski had the rifle now, was firing controlled bursts at the door where more guards were trying to enter. The room dissolved into chaos. Gunfire, shouting, smoke from the firefight in the corridor outside. Tessa grabbed Volkov's fallen Makarov, rolled away from him, came up on her knees. Her leg was screaming, her vision swimming, but she aimed at Dmitri just as the Spetsnaz operative got a bead on Kowalski. She fired. The shot took Dmitri's center mass. He stumbled, fell. Volkov was back on his feet, reaching for a backup weapon concealed at the small of his back. He was going to shoot Tessa, or Kowalski, or Sloan, or all three. His face was a mask of rage and betrayal. But Tessa's Makarov was empty. She'd fired her only round. The weapon clicked uselessly as she pulled the trigger again. Volkov's gun came up, aimed directly at her face. You should have stayed dead, Ghost. The wall exploded inward. Shaped charges precisely placed by operators who knew exactly what they were doing blew a hole in the concrete large enough to drive a small truck through. Webb came through the breach, first his machine gun already chattering. Blackwood was right behind him, moving with the practiced efficiency of 2 decades of close-quarters combat. Volkov tried to turn, tried to engage the new threat, but Blackwood was faster. 2 shots, both center mass, both perfectly placed. Volkov went down hard. Tessa's status, Blackwood shouted over the chaos. We have the pilot, but Volkov's still alive. Volkov was indeed still alive, his body armor having absorbed Blackwood's shots. He was reaching for his weapon again, his face twisted with rage and pain, determined to take someone with him, if this was his end. But Tessa was closer. Despite her broken leg, despite her exhaustion, despite everything, she moved, launched herself at Volkov one final time. Her medical training guided her hands to exactly the right points. Carotid arteries, the blood vessels that fed oxygen to the brain. She pressed with precise force, not to kill, though she wanted to subdue, to render unconscious. Volkov struggled, tried to throw her off, but she had the angle, had the leverage, had the knowledge of exactly how much pressure to apply and where. His movements became sluggish, his vision began to fade, and finally he went limp. Blackwood pulled her off before she could finish it. Tessa, stand down. We need him alive. Intelligence value. She wanted to argue, wanted to complete what she'd started. But Blackwood was right. Volkov alive meant interrogations, meant the chance to dismantle his entire network, meant justice for everyone he'd hurt. She let go. Webb zip-tied Volkov's unconscious form while Blackwood checked on Sloan. The pilot was barely conscious but alive. Bruised, beaten, but alive. Can you walk? Blackwood asked her gently. I, I think so. Good, because we need to move. This whole place is rigged to blow. Volkov's fail-safe. We've got maybe 2 minutes. The evacuation was a blur of pain and adrenaline. Tessa hobbling on her broken leg, Kowalski supporting Sloan Blackwood, and Webb providing security. They reached the helicopters with 30 seconds to spare. As the Black Hawks lifted off the compound below, erupted in a series of massive explosions. The cave system collapsed, burying Volkov's base of operations under thousands of tons of rock and earth. His empire built over 20 years destroyed in seconds. Tessa watched from the helicopter's open door as they flew away. Felt no satisfaction, no triumph, just profound exhaustion and the bone-deep knowledge that she'd done what needed to be done. Sloan Mercer was alive. The mission was complete. Volkov was captured, and she had survived another operation that should have killed her. But at what cost? She looked down at her hands. The same hands that had saved countless lives as a Navy corpsman. The same hands that had taken 52 lives as a CIA sniper. The same hands that had just choked a man unconscious while her broken body screamed in protest. Both skills, just like her father had taught her, but she was so tired of needing both. The helicopter flew on through the darkness, carrying its cargo of broken operators and rescued hostages toward safety, toward medical care and debriefing and whatever came next. But for Tessa Marlowe, sitting in the open door with the desert wind in her face and pain radiating through every nerve, there was only one thought. She wanted to go home. Not to California, not to the hospital, not to CIA headquarters. Home. To Montana. To her father's grave. To tell him that she'd kept his promise after all in her own way. She'd used both skills. Healed when she could, fought when she must. And she was finally ready to rest. 6 months later, Tessa stood before a classroom at the Naval Special Warfare Center in Coronado, California. Her leg had healed, though she walked with a permanent limp that doctors said would never fully disappear. The scars from her injuries had faded to thin white lines, but they would always be there, physical reminders of the night she'd pushed her body beyond its limits. 18 students sat before her. A mix of Navy corpsmen and Marine medics, carefully selected for their aptitude, their dedication, and their potential. They were the first class of a new program, Combat Medic Sniper Integration, the kind of hybrid warfare specialist that the military was only now beginning to understand it desperately needed. On the whiteboard behind her, she'd written 6 words: heal when you can, fight when you must. Good morning, she said, her voice carrying easily across the classroom, despite its quietness. My name is Tessa Marlowe. For the next 6 months, I'm going to teach you how to save lives. And I'm going to teach you how to take lives, in that order. Always in that order. She picked up a medical kit with her left hand, a rifle with her right. You'll need both of these. Medicine requires precision, delicacy, the ability to work under intense pressure without causing additional harm. Marksmanship requires patience, control, the ability to make impossible shots under impossible conditions. You might think these skills are contradictory. They're not. They're complementary, 2 sides of the same coin. One of the students raised his hand. Ma'am, how do you decide when to heal and when to fight? Tessa was quiet for a moment, remembering her father's letter, remembering the promise she'd made and broken and somehow kept all at the same time. You heal until healing isn't enough. You try every medical option, exhaust every alternative, do everything in your power to save lives through your medical skills. But when that's not enough, when lives are on the line and there's no other way, when your team is dying and you're the only one who can make the shot, she paused, making sure they understood. Then you fight. You do what must be done. And then if you survive, you go right back to healing. Because that's the core of who we are. Healers first. Warriors only when absolutely required. The class absorbed this, processing the weight of what she was telling them. After the lecture ended, Commander Blackwood waited for her outside the classroom. He'd been promoted to captain, now coordinating special operations throughout the Pacific Theater. But he'd made time to check on the first day of her first class. How did it go? Good. They're sharp, motivated. They'll do well. That's not what I meant. Tess understood. He was asking whether she'd found peace with everything that had happened. With the kills, the compromises, the broken promises, and broken bones. I visited my mother last month, she said quietly. Drove up to Montana. First time since the mission. Told her everything. Who I really am. What I really do. How did she take it? She cried for about 2 hours, didn't say a word, just cried. I thought she'd never forgive me. Tessa smiled slightly at the memory, but then she dried her eyes and said something I'll never forget. She said my father would have been proud, not because I became a killer, but because I found a way to honor both parts of his legacy, the healing and the fighting, the medicine and the marksmanship. And are you proud of what you've done? Tessa looked through the classroom window at the young faces inside, students who wanted to make a difference, who understood that the world sometimes required both medicine and violence, who were willing to carry that impossible burden. I'm getting there, she said honestly. That evening, Tessa drove to Montana. The drive took most of the day, but she didn't mind. She needed the time to think, to process, to prepare herself for what came next. The cemetery sat on a hillside overlooking the valley where she'd grown up. Her father's grave was under an old oak tree, the headstone simple but dignified. Colonel Garrett Marlowe, USMC, beloved husband and father, 1968 to 2012. She knelt beside it, her reconstructed leg protesting but manageable now after months of physical therapy. From her bag, she pulled out a medal. The Intelligence Star, awarded for exceptional service in operations of vital importance to national security. She'd received it in a private ceremony at CIA headquarters. No press, no public recognition, just a quiet acknowledgement of what she'd done in the darkness. She placed it next to her father's headstone beside the flowers her mother had left during her last visit. I broke my promise, Dad, she whispered. I picked up the rifle. I became what you didn't want me to be. But I also kept your real promise. I used both skills. I healed when I could, I fought when I had to, and I never forgot which one should come first. The wind rustled through the oak leaves, carrying the scent of summer grass and mountain air. In the distance, she could see the ranch where her father had taught her to shoot, where he'd given her the gift of marksmanship along with the wisdom to know when to use it. I'm teaching now, she continued, passing on what you taught me, what the Navy taught me, what experience taught me through pain and blood. There's a whole generation coming up who will understand both sides, who will know they don't have to choose between healing and fighting. They can be both. A voice spoke behind her, gentle and familiar. I knew I'd find you here. Tessa turned to see her mother standing there, Martha Marlowe, 63 years old, silver-haired and strong, despite the grief that had marked her for 14 years. Mom, I didn't know you were coming. I come here every week, have been since the day we buried him. Her mother moved to stand beside her, looking down at the grave. But today felt different. I had a feeling you'd be here. They stood together in silence for a long moment. Then Martha spoke again. I'm sorry for how I reacted when you told me. The crying, the silence, that wasn't fair to you. You had every right to be upset. I broke my promise to you. No, you kept the promise that mattered most. Martha knelt beside the grave, her hand touching the headstone with the gentle reverence of long practice. Your father and I, we made you that promise because we were afraid. Afraid of losing you the way I lost him. Afraid of guns and violence and war. But I did go to war. I did become a soldier, even though I never wore the uniform in the traditional sense. Yes, but you also became a healer. You saved more than 50 lives as a corpsman before the CIA ever recruited you. And even after, even when you were doing the dark work that nobody can acknowledge, you never lost your heart. You never became cruel. You never forgot that the purpose of all of it is to protect people who can't protect themselves. Martha's eyes were wet now, but she was smiling. That's what your father really wanted. Not for you to never fight, but for you to remember why you were fighting. To keep your humanity even when doing inhuman things. And you did that, Tessa. God help me, you did that. Tessa felt tears running down her own cheeks now. I've killed 52 people, Mom. 52 human beings who don't get to go home to their families. How do I live with that? The same way your father lived with it. The same way every soldier throughout history has lived with it. You remember why you did it. You remember the people you saved because of those choices. And you use that pain to make sure you never forget the cure, never become casual about taking a life. They knelt together beside the grave, mother and daughter, united in grief and love and understanding. After a while, Martha spoke again. I want you to come to the house. There's something your father left for you, something I wasn't supposed to give you until, she paused, until you needed it. They drove together to the old ranch house where Tessa had grown up. It looked exactly as she remembered, though smaller somehow, the way childhood places always did when you returned as an adult. Martha led her to the study, her father's private space that had been left largely untouched since his death. She pulled out a lock-in case from the closet, used a key she wore on a chain around her neck. Inside was a rifle. Not just any rifle. Her father's Barrett M82A1, the same model Tessa had used in the firefight that saved Blackwood's team. He wanted you to have this, Martha said quietly. His will specified that on the day you truly understood both sides of his lesson, I was to give you this. I think that day is today. Tessa lifted the rifle carefully. It was heavy, familiar, and carried the weight of memory along with its 30 pounds of steel and precision engineering. Attached to the rifle was a final note written in her father's handwriting. Tessa, if you're reading this, then you understand now. You know what it means to heal and to fight, to save and to kill, to use both skills in service of something larger than yourself. This rifle saved my life more than once. I pray it does the same for you. But more than that, I pray you use it sparingly. Only when there's no other choice. Only when all your healing skills have been exhausted and fighting is the only option left. You have a gift, my daughter, the rarest kind. You can save a life at one moment and take one at the next and somehow remain human through it all. That's not a burden. That's a calling. Use it well. Love you always, Dad. Tessa stood in her father's study, holding his rifle, her mother beside her, and felt something shift inside. A weight she'd been carrying for years, the weight of guilt and doubt and endless questioning began to ease. She wasn't a killer who occasionally saved people. She wasn't a healer who occasionally had to kill. She was both, fully integrated, and that was okay. 3 days later, Tessa returned to Coronado for the second week of her training program. But this time, she brought her father's rifle with her. In the classroom, she showed it to her students. This belonged to my father, she told them. He was Marine Force Recon. He taught me to shoot when I was 10 years old. And he taught me something more important, that the rifle is a tool, nothing more. It's what you do with it that matters. Whether you use it to protect or to harm, to defend or to attack, to save or to destroy. She paused, making sure they understood. You're going to learn to use weapons like this one. You're going to become proficient, maybe even expert, on taking life from a distance. But I never want you to forget your primary mission. You're medics first. Your hands are meant to heal. The rifle is only for when healing isn't enough. The students absorbed this, their young faces serious with the weight of what they were learning. After class, Lieutenant Holden Grant found her in the armory. His right arm was in a brace now, the shoulder permanently damaged from the firefight 6 months ago. He'd never snipe again. But he'd found new purpose as the medical instructor for Tessa's program teaching combat medicine while she taught marksmanship. The students are responding well, he said. They respect you. They trust you. That's not easy to earn in this community. I'm just teaching them what my father taught me. You're teaching them more than that. You're showing them how to live with impossible choices, how to integrate two contradictory skill sets, how to keep your humanity when everything is trying to take it from you. Holden paused. That's not something you can teach from a manual. That's something you have to live. Over the following months, Tessa's program grew and evolved. The first class of 18 students graduated with honors. The program expanded to include 36 students for the second class. The Pentagon took notice. The VA requested that similar programs be developed for training civilian first responders. A doctrine began to emerge, something the military started calling integrated combat medicine. The idea that medics should have advanced tactical skills and that tactical operators should have advanced medical skills. That the artificial separation between healing and fighting was outdated in modern warfare. Tessa's students began to be deployed to operational units, and reports started coming back. Combat saves that wouldn't have been possible without their integrated training. Precision shots that protected wounded teammates while medical treatment was ongoing. Operators who could stabilize casualties under fire and then immediately return to the fight. The concept was working. 6 months after the first class graduated, Tessa received a letter. It came in an unmarked envelope, no return address, forwarded through official CIA channels. Inside was a single page typed, "Dear Ghost, I write to you from a federal detention facility where I await trial for crimes I will not enumerate here. You know what I have done. You know what I am. I write not to apologize, for we both know that would be meaningless. I chose my path with open eyes and I accept the consequences. I write instead to tell you something you may not know. When you exposed my network, when you helped capture Volkov and dismantle our operations, you saved lives. Not just the lives of those we might have harmed with the weapons we sold, but the lives of people caught in our web. Forced laborers, coerced participants, those who worked for us not by choice, but by circumstance. The information you gathered led to their liberation, children who were being used as couriers, women who were trapped in our organization, men who had been blackmailed into service. I tell you this not to absolve my guilt, but to acknowledge your success. You were the best operative I ever encountered, better than any of Volkov's people, better than me. You played a role so perfectly that even knowing you were CIA sometimes believed the fiction. That takes a special kind of person. Someone who can lie without losing themselves in the lie. Someone who can kill without becoming a killer. Someone who can descend into darkness without being consumed by it. I hope you find peace, Tessa Marlowe. I hope you use your gifts for good. And I hope you remember that even in our worst moments, even when we do terrible things, there is still the possibility of redemption. Not for me. My redemption is beyond reach. But for those you save, for those you teach, for those who come after. That is legacy worth having. Respectfully, a former adversary. The letter wasn't signed, but Tessa knew who it was from. Dmitry Volkov's head of security, the ex-Spetsnaz operative she'd shot but not killed, who was now facing life in prison for his crimes. She read the letter 3 times, then carefully filed it away. She would never respond. There was nothing to say, but she kept it as a reminder of something important. That even enemies could acknowledge truth. That even in the darkness there were moments of clarity. That every action had consequences beyond what you could see. A year after Tessa started teaching, Captain Blackwood visited her classroom one final time. He'd been promoted again, now coordinating special operations at the theater level. But he'd made time for this. The second class graduates tomorrow, he said. 36 new operators who understand both sides. Who can heal and fight. That's your legacy, Tessa. It's my father's legacy. I'm just passing it on. No, it's more than that. Your father taught you to shoot. The Navy taught you to heal. But you're the one who figured out how to integrate them. How to use both skills without losing yourself in the process. That's all you. They walked together through the training facility, watching students practice medical procedures in one building and marksmanship in another, seamlessly transitioning between the two skill sets. There's something I need to tell you, Blackwood said, about Foster. Tessa's stomach tightened. The traitor who'd sold them out, who'd nearly gotten them all killed. What about him? He was killed 6 months ago, trying to cross the border into Mexico with money Volkov had paid him. Caught in a firefight with Border Patrol. Died from his wounds before they could get him medical attention. Good, Tessa said and mentored it. The investigation into the larger leak is still ongoing. Whoever was feeding Volkov's strategic intelligence from inside SOCOM, they've gone deep underground. CIA and NSA are working the problem, but these things take time. They'll find them eventually. People like that always make mistakes. I hope you're right. Blackwood stopped walking, turned to face her directly. Tessa, I want you to know something. What you did out there, what you sacrificed, what you endured. That saved more than just my team. The EMP technology you helped recover led to improvements in our electronic warfare capabilities. The intelligence you gathered on Volkov's network has dismantled weapons trafficking operations across 3 continents. And this program you've built, it's changing how we think about combat medicine and tactical operations. I was just doing my job. No, you were doing something more. You were proving that the old boundaries don't have to exist, that we can be more than just specialists. That integration is possible if you're willing to do the work. After Blackwood left, Tessa sat alone in her office, looking at the photographs on her wall. Her father in his Marine uniform, her first graduating class. Sloan Mercer, now promoted to major and commanding her own squadron, visiting to thank Tessa personally for saving her life. And one photograph that meant more than all the others combined. Her mother standing beside her father's grave, smiling despite her tears. Finally at peace with the choices her daughter had made. Tessa pulled out her father's letter one more time. Read it again, even though she'd memorized every word. Both hands, Tessa. She understood now. Really understood. Her father hadn't been teaching her to be a medic or a sniper. He'd been teaching her to be complete, to have the skills to save and the skills to destroy and the wisdom to know which was required. She picked up her medical kit with her left hand, her father's rifle with her right, both hands, always both hands. The phone rang. New orders from CIA. A new situation developing overseas. A hostage crisis that required someone with her unique skill set. Someone who could infiltrate, assess, and either negotiate a peaceful resolution or eliminate the threat with precision fire. Tessa looked at the phone for a long moment. Then she answered, "This is Marlowe. What do you need?" Because that's what she did. That's who she was. A healer when she could be. A warrior when she had to be. Both. Always both, and somehow through pain and sacrifice and impossible choices she'd made peace with that. The work would continue. The mission would evolve. But the core principle would remain passed down from father to daughter to the next generation of operators who would carry it forward. Heal when you can, fight when you must, and never ever forget which comes first. Tessa Marlowe stood at her office window looking out over the Pacific Ocean and smiled. She was home. The work had just begun. But she was ready, both hands